In 1979, geological engineer Phil Schneider descended into a secret government shaft in New Mexico. He expected to find rock. Instead, he found a 7-foot-tall gray alien. A firefight erupted. Schneider shot 2 of the beings, but a third blasted him with a blue beam, burning off his fingers and tearing a hole in his chest. 66 Americans died in what became known as the Battle of Dulce. Schneider was one of only 3 survivors. He spent the rest of his life trying to warn the world about the secret war happening under our feet. Then, in 1996, at his most famous lecture, he said, "If I ever commit suicide, you'll know I was murdered." 4 months later, he was found dead, a rubber catheter tube wrapped around his neck. The official cause was suicide. Phil Schneider claimed he was a man who built prisons for a secret government and lived to regret it. For 17 years, he worked as a geologist and structural engineer on the government's black budget, helping to construct a vast network of deep underground military bases. According to Schneider, the United States is home to 131 of these secret bases, with over 1,400 worldwide. Each facility is an underground city, averaging over 4 cubic miles in size and buried more than a mile deep. The black budget that funds these projects, he claimed, consumes over a quarter of the nation's gross national product, more than $500 billion a year, funneled through clandestine CIA operations and hidden from Congress and the American people. These bases are connected by a subterranean highway of magneto-leviton trains, capable of traveling at Mach 2, linking the entire country in a web of tunnels invisible to the world above. Schneider said he personally worked on 13 of these bases, including the infamous Area 51, but his most harrowing assignment was at a site near the small town of Dulce, New Mexico. The official story, according to Schneider, began in 1954. President Eisenhower, desperate for a technological edge over the Soviets, allegedly signed a pact known as the Greada Treaty with an alien species we now call the Greys. The deal was a trade. The aliens would provide advanced technology, and in exchange, the U.S. government would allow them to abduct a limited number of cattle and humans for experimentation. The government was supposed to be given a complete list of all human abductees, but the aliens lied. They took far more than was agreed upon. Schneider claimed that by 1995, over 100,000 children and 1 million adults were disappearing every year in America, completely unaccounted for. These weren't kidnappings or murders, they were harvests. He believed these missing people were being taken to underground bases like Dulce. According to at least 9 hostile alien races, humans are nothing more than a food source. They don't eat our flesh. They use our glandular secretions, harvesting substances like adrenaline to get high. Dulce Base is not just a military installation. It's a joint human-alien biolab with at least 7 subterranean levels. The deeper you go, the more horrifying it becomes. The upper levels are for security and housing for human staff, but level 4 is where the unspeakable begins. Genetic research, DNA splicing, and cross-species experiments. Whistleblowers describe vats filled with hybrid creatures, part human, part something else. Level 5 is the alien floor, controlled entirely by non-human entities. But it's Level 6 that earned the name Nightmare Hall. Here, Humans and animals are subjected to grotesque genetic and cybernetic experiments. Cages are filled with multi-limbed creatures, beings with multiple eyes, and people fused with animals, all screaming in a chorus of agony and confusion. One former security officer, Thomas Costello, described it as hell made physical. And below it all is level 7. Almost nothing is known about this final floor, but it's where the experiments are kept in cryogenic storage. It's where the nightmares are put on ice, waiting. The battle at Dulce in 1979 was the turning point, after his team accidentally drilled into an existing alien base that was centuries old. The brief, bloody conflict exposed the terrible truth. The aliens were not partners, they were occupiers, and the technology exchange was a lie. Schneider claimed that military technology is now over 1,200 years more advanced than anything in the public sector. Stealth aircraft, special metal alloys that can withstand millions of degrees, and even earthquake-inducing weapons were all developed from alien designs. Phil spent the last years of his life on the lecture circuit, showing his injuries, presenting alleged alien medals, and displaying a photo of an alien named Valiant Thor, who he claimed had been working with the Pentagon for over 58 years. He knew he was a target. He claimed there had been 11 attempts on his life. Just 2 weeks before one lecture, he was shot in the shoulder. His death was not a surprise to him, or to anyone who heard his warning. He was a man who knew his time was running out, determined to expose a truth so terrifying, the powers that be would kill to keep it buried. So, what do we make of all this? A dead man with missing fingers and missing files, an underground war between humans and aliens, a secret treaty that sold out humanity for a few pieces of technology. It's an incredible story, but is it true? Let's start with what we can verify. The phenomenon of cattle mutilations in the Dulce area during the 1970s is real. State Trooper Gabe Valdez investigated them, and the FBI even produced a report, though they ultimately dismissed it as predator action. Paul Benowitz was a real defense contractor who believed he was intercepting alien signals near Kirtland Air Force Base, and Phil Schneider did work as a government contractor. But that's where the verifiable facts end and the story begins to unravel. The biggest hole in the story is Phil Schneider himself. He claimed his father, Oscar Schneider, was a Nazi U-boat captain who defected to America. But public records, including the 1910 U.S. Census, show Oscar Schneider was born in San Francisco in 1906 to Jewish parents from the Russian Empire. He served honorably as a medical officer in the U.S. Navy during World War II, treating wounded sailors after Pearl Harbor. He was a hero, but he was never a Nazi. Phil's claims about his own background are just as shaky. He never earned an engineering degree. In the late 1960s, he was committed to a state hospital where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was noted to be prone to self-mutilation. It was during this time that he lost his fingers. His own ex-wife Cynthia confirmed that Phil told multiple conflicting stories about his injuries, from a battle with aliens to a lineman accident to a sawmill accident. And the Battle of Dulce? Phil's description of the military units present, NATO alliance, Delta Force, and the Secret Service, betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of military jurisdiction. NATO does not operate on American soil. The Secret Service investigates financial crimes and protects dignitaries. They don't engage in underground firefights. And in 1979, the newly formed Delta Force was a top-secret counterterrorism unit, not a security detail for geologists. The origins of the Dulce Base legend itself are murky. tracing back to the UFO community of the 70s and 80s, fueled by the disinformation campaign run by Air Force agent Richard Doty against Paul Benowitz. Characters like Thomas Costello appear to be fabrications, with no military records matching their names or stories. Even the famous photo of humans in pods is a screenshot from the 2000 Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, The Sixth Day. Schneider's timeline presents a major contradiction. He claimed to have found a base aliens had occupied for centuries, yet the 1954 Greada Treaty he cited as the reason for their presence would mean they had only been there for 25 years by the time of the firefight. Schneider also claimed over 100,000 children and 1 million adults were vanishing annually. For 1995, the Department of Justice estimated the number of stereotypical stranger kidnappings was between 200 and 300. As you know, missing person report and a person who is permanently gone are two different things. Even if you add all the resolved missing person reports to the actual missing people number, Schneider's estimates are still way off. So, was Phil Schneider a complete fraud? A con man who cobbled together existing UFO lore into a compelling but fictional narrative? It's possible, but that explanation doesn't account for everything. Why would a man who fabricated his entire life story be so terrified of being silenced? His friends and family confirmed he was genuinely afraid. His friend Ron Rummel, who published Alien Digest, was found dead in a park in 1993. The death was ruled a suicide, but a handwriting expert determined the suicide note was written by a left-handed person. Rummel was right-handed. And then there is the manner of Phil's own death. It's hard to ignore his own prediction. If I ever commit suicide, you'll know I was murdered. A man with limited mobility in his hands and shoulders, suffering from brittle bones and chronic pain, strangling himself with a rubber catheter tube wrapped 3 times around his neck and tied in complex knots. The police didn't even perform a full autopsy. Key evidence from his apartment, including his research, photos, and alleged alien artifact, all vanished. This is where the story gets complicated. Phil Schneider was a deeply troubled man with a history of mental illness who invented a heroic backstory for himself and his family. But it's also possible that in his time as a contractor, he stumbled upon something real, a small piece of a much larger, darker truth. Maybe, in a desperate attempt to be heard, he wrapped that small truth in a mountain of elaborate lies. His stories may have been fake, but his fear was real. And in the world of black budgets and government secrets, sometimes even a lie that gets too close to the truth is enough to get you killed. The story of Dulce Base isn't really about aliens. It's about a vacuum. For decades, the United States government has operated in the shadows, creating a world of classified projects and black budgets, completely shielded from public view. This secrecy creates a void of information, and into that void step men like Phil Schneider. They offer answers, fantastical, paranoid, and often unverifiable, but answers nonetheless. We are drawn to these stories not because we are gullible, but because we are starved for truth. The government's official policy of denial and ridicule on the subject of UFOs has bred a deep and warranted distrust. When they lie about what they're seeing in the sky, it becomes easier to believe they're hiding alien wars beneath the ground. Phil Schneider may have been a fabulist, but he was a symptom of a much larger disease, the systemic secrecy that rots the foundation of a free society. The real tragedy isn't that we might be sharing our planet with hostile aliens. The real tragedy is that we have to rely on broken men and whispered rumors to learn what our own government is doing. The truth we should be demanding isn't about Nightmare Hall or battles with Greys. It's about accountability. It's about an end to the lies. Because until the secrecy ends, That dark, empty space beneath the desert will continue to be filled with our worst fears. And that's why I don't want to just believe. I want to know. This channel is about building a community of curious minds. So, if you enjoy digging into these complex mysteries, make sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Thank you for sticking with us until the end. This is Based Uncovered. Until next time, stay vigilant.